Welcome, my friends, to day 22 in our PMP exam mindset, which goes with the book PMP Exam Immersion. PMP Exam Immersion can be found on Amazon everywhere books are sold. It helps you cover the information in a very methodical, streamlined manner, very similar to how I'm breaking it down. You see, I'm not in a rush. This is not a race to get so many questions in. Instead, it is trying to establish a very firm base, one block at a time. So for those of you who might have either just started the process or you're somewhere in the middle, or those who got to the end and thought they were ready and realized, the exam was harder than I thought, this is an opportunity for you to rebuild. Okay, this is a rebuilding. So day 22 on scope, Stephen Covey, rest his soul, he said the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. And in the world of project management, guess what our priorities are? They are scope-related activities. Everything boils down to the initial scope. This chapter in our book, PMP Exam Immersion, highlights the processes involved in defining, validating, and controlling what is and is not included in the project. It discusses the importance of clearly understanding project boundaries and requirements to prevent scope creep and things like goal plating, and also to ensure project success. Now, in the world of Agile, scope management is flexible and adaptive, with priorities being assessed at regular intervals, such as at the end of each sprint, to ensure alignment with customer needs and project goals. So, to open up your mind to this aspect of our studying, here are some very quick true or false questions. Question 1. True or false? Agile projects have a fixed scope that does not change throughout the project. The answer is false. Agile projects embrace change, so their scope is adaptive and flexible rather than fixed. While there's an overall vision, detailed scope is refined iteratively, allowing for adjustments based on feedback, new information, and evolving market needs. Number 2. Regularly reassessing project priorities is a key aspect of Agile scope management. True or false? Yes, this is definitely in the hallmark of Agile. Regularly reassessing project priorities through backlog refinement and sprint planning is central to Agile scope management. It ensures that the team is always working on the most valuable items and that the scope remains aligned with current business needs. Number 3. True or false? Scope creep is less likely in Agile projects due to its iterative nature. If you thought that this was true as a blanket statement, it is actually not. Agile's iterative nature means that requirements are continuously evolving based on feedback and market conditions. Unlike traditional project management, where changes are often viewed as failures in initial planning, Agile sees them as valuable for improving the project. However, this constant evolution, if unchecked, can lead to the addition of features or requirements without corresponding adjustments to the project's timeline, budget, or resources. And that is the definition of scope creep. So we have to be careful that we don't jump at blanket statements like this, like Agile makes scope creep less likely. Not true. Not true. With bad management, you could still have a whole lot of scope creep. All right, here's another one. True or false? Agile scope management involves rigid adherence to initial project requirements. Well, just as you saw in the previous question, this is false because Agile scope management is characterized by flexibility and adaptability, not rigid adherence to initial requirements. Requirements are expected to evolve, and the process is designed to accommodate these changes to deliver the most valuable product. Finally, number 5. True or false? Customer feedback is a crucial element in managing scope in Agile projects. we thrive on customer feedback in Agile. So this is true. Customer feedback is fundamental to managing scope in Agile. Through frequent reviews and interactions, customer input directly influences the prioritization and refinement of the product backlog, ensuring the scope delivers what the customer truly needs and values. With that, let's go on to our question for today. All right, the question reads, the project team has completed the initial scope definition and WBS. However, during stakeholder review, several influential stakeholders expressed concern that critical functionalities they expected are not explicitly detailed in the scope statement, leading to potential future disputes. What is the project manager's best action to manage scope and ensure stakeholder alignment? A. Inform the stakeholders that the scope statement is finalized and any new functionalities must go through the formal change control process. Is it B? Revisit the requirements collection process with the concerned stakeholders using elicitation techniques to clarify and document their expectations, and then update the scope statement and WBS if warranted following formal approval? Or is it C? Prioritize the development of a detailed requirements traceability matrix to link all existing requirements to project deliverables, demonstrating what is currently included? Or is it D? Conduct a series of one-on-one meetings with each influential stakeholder to understand their individual interpretations and attempt to align them with the current documented scope. I'll give you some time to think about this. All right, let's take a look at the answer. What exactly is the problem here? That should always be the first thing, to define the problem and then identify the root cause. The problem here is that stakeholders are concerned that the scope statement is not comprehensive enough. What should you do as a PM? And the answer? You got to fix it if that is true. And let's take a look at all the options. Option A, tell the stakeholders scope statement is finalized. If you want anything new, it's got to go through change control. That doesn't solve the problem, and it also doesn't sound very friendly. Option B, revisiting the requirements collection process seems long and daunting, but if your requirements and your scope are not tight enough, you got to tighten them. It says, then update the scope statement and WBS if warranted, following formal approval. That's not bad. But if I look at A that says going through change control, that's actually not true, because we are in scope definition. This is still in planning. So we don't have to go through change control, the change control board, when we are still in the middle of planning. So I wouldn't go with A, just looking at these two. B would be the better choice. Option C, prioritize the development of a detailed RTM. Well, there's nothing that tells us that there was not a requirements traceability matrix. But if you think about it, the problem right here is not the requirements. You see, it says they express concern that the critical functionalities are not explicitly detailed in the project scope statement. And that's actually a different document than the RTM. The RTM identifies requirements, but the scope statement breaks down how those requirements will be met, how the work will be done, you see. So doing this still doesn't really address their concerns. You still need to do something about that project scope statement. Let's go on to option D. Conduct a series of one-on-one meetings with each influential stakeholder. Just think about how much time that will take. It says several influential stakeholders. Now you want to get them all on the same page. Why would you do a series of one-on-one meetings with all these several stakeholders? All right? And even if you say, well, it's just the influential ones, to understand their individual interpretations and attempt to align them with the current documented scope. Oh, this is what you're thinking of. Well, it's there in the scope. No. So the best answer in this case, my friends, is B. Here's the logic. When individual stakeholders express concern about missing functionalities after initial scope definition, the project manager's best action is to revisit requirements collection. This allows for clarification and documentation of expectations, ensuring the scope statement and WBS accurately reflect stakeholder needs before proceeding and avoiding future disputes. So option B is a good one. It sounds similar to C, but it doesn't go the extra mile. C doesn't go the extra mile in clarifying, documenting expectations, and updating the documenting question, right? And the WBS, if warranted. Remember, the WBS comes after the scope statement. So you have plan, scope management, which includes planning how to collect the requirements, right? Because we get a requirements management plan from plan scope management. Then we have collect the requirements. Then we have define the scope and then create WBS. So that's why the answer is B. Okay. I hope that gave you some perspective, maybe different from how you would have, tackled this question before. All right. Let's get into the mindset details in task 8, plan and manage scope. So here, as a professional, you got to be wearing both an agile and hybrid hat and a predictive hat. In the world of Agile, we have a product backlog. Then that's broken down in the iterations into sprint backlog. And as we proceed, we are breaking down what needs to be done sprint by sprint or iteration by iteration. This is different in the world of predictive. In predictive, we do these things. We determine and prioritize the requirements. Then we break down the scope. We get a WBS, and then we ensure that we're not deviating from what was planned. There's no gold plating, and we get the customer to validate the scope. Going back to the world of Agile, we have all of this stuff done in different ways. Determining and prioritizing the requirements is not done once on the project. It is constantly done by the product owner sprint by sprint. And additional requirements or if you are using user stories or features, they can be added to the backlog at any time by anyone. The question is, will they be done? And that's up to the product owner. Breaking down what needs to be done, we do that when we are looking at our PBIs in Agile, our product backlog items. And one of the things we talk about is the hierarchy of product, epic, feature, story, and then task underneath. So there's a hierarchy when we do this in the world of Agile as well. In terms of monitoring, we are always ensuring that nothing has been added that wasn't supposed to be done in that sprint. And this is what everyone on the team should be doing, especially the product owner. Anything not in the backlog is not fair game for a sprint. And then when it comes to validating the scope, this is where the customer or the stakeholders are involved in the sprint review, check in whatever has been completed by the team. All right, so that's it. The mindset of scope management needs to be non-negotiable. You got to manage that scope. You got to prevent gold plating. Even in the world of Agile, you got to prevent poor behaviors from stakeholders trying to shove stuff into the sprint. You see, we have a rule in the world of Agile. Once the sprint is airborne, you do not open the cabin, right? Once we're flying 40,000 feet in the air, right? Theoretically speaking, in a sprint, you do not open the cabin door and say, hey, bring in some more requirements. Now, that's not to say that requirements couldn't change mid-sprint, but we don't encourage it. In fact, it's one of the, if you wanted to call, restrictions that we have in the world of Agile. It is adding stuff mid-sprint, midstream, because that's going to throw you off your initial promise, your initial target. You know, we have these things called sprint goals in Scrum. So if you're adding more other things, if the product owner is constantly doing that, that's poor behaviors. We don't want that. Okay? So your mindset needs to be one of governance, one of the right levels of control, transparency, and honesty. All right? Thank you, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Smash that like button, and I'll see you next time. And remember, study.pmradio.org and pmp.pmradio.org. Those are two resources you can get additional help, videos that are free, and a podcast. The study.pmradio.org is the podcast, and the pmp.pmradio.org are many, many other videos that kind of go preceding this series. All right? If you're looking for full-blown training course, then go on down to tinyurl.com/elite PMP. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.